how to read and understand poetry. This is our first lecture. When you first see a poem. Okay, so what do you do when you first see a poem? Do you A, run in fear, B, read it once, or C, read it 7 times? Now, it should be pretty obvious. The answer is obviously A. Kidding. It's C. You read it 7 times silently. And I know when I say that number, that just sounds enormous. 7 times? Are you kidding me? Well, unless you're a super genius, you're not going to understand it the first time. Or the second time. Probably not the 5th time either. You need to read it 7 times, and if you still read it after 7 times, and you still don't understand it, then you need to look for these tropes and metaphors and things we're going to go over in this course. If you still don't understand it after that, then you need to pray that you'll get the strength to carry on. Some poems are impossible to understand, like the Great Kubla Khan. I've always had trouble understanding that poem, personally. And then I read it, well, this doesn't really make sense to me. And it was an opioid dream. That's why I can't understand it. He couldn't understand it. But it is a great poem. It's very descriptive. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay, so the first thing we actually do, after we read it 7 times, actually before we read it 7 times, we look at the title. So, here's the rule with poetry. If the title is different than the first line, then it's important. If it's the same, then it's not important. So, I'm going to interject poetry every now and then, because this is a poetry course. So let me begin. Where is God? By Minnow J. Savage. Oh, where is the sea? The fishes cried as they swam the crystal clearness through. We've heard from old of the ocean's tide, and we long to look at the water's blue. The wise ones speak of the infinite sea. Oh, who can tell us if such there be? The lark flew up in the morning bright, and sang and balanced on sunny wings. And this was its song, I see the light. I look o'er a world of beautiful things, but flying and singing everywhere. In vain I have searched to find the air. Okay, so that poem, you can pause the video and try to figure out the meaning. I'm going to tell you what I interpret the poem to be. Now, different people interpret the poem to be different things. Okay, so my interpretation is, so they each ask, the fish, because they're in the sea, can't understand where the sea is, what the sea is. The lark, because it's in the sky, can't understand where the sky is. And us, since we're in God's creation, can't understand where God is. That's my interpretation of the poem. So, this is the fish's cry, this is the lark's cry, and this is our cry as the human race. Where is God? Well, we're in God's creation, according to Minnow J. Savage. You can also interpret the poem to mean nature is God. But I personally don't think that's it. But those are the 2 big interpretations. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about reading poetry. We need to go over caesuras and commas. Now, when I say that, you've probably never heard that word before, caesura. So what it is it's a natural pause in poetry. You never read a poem like it's written, like you think you would. Let me show you an example. I'm going to read the first line of this famous poem by Carol Ann Duffy, titled The War Photographer. I'm going to read it like most people would read it, and then I'm going to read it like you're actually supposed to read it. In his dark room he is finally alone, with spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. The only light is red and softly glows, as though this were a church and he, a priest preparing to intone a mass. Belfast, Beru, Phnom Penh, all flesh is grass. He has a job to do, solutions slop in trays, beneath his hands, which did not tremble then, though seem to now rule England home again, to ordinary pain which simple weather can dispel, to fields which don't explode beneath his feet, of running children in a nightmare heat. Okay, so this is a great poem, and it uses caesuras and commas a lot. Caesuras are natural pauses in the poem. Sometimes they're indicated by punctuation, Sometimes they're not, and you just know to pause, because that's natural. Commas indicate a pause too, but it's a little bit more subtle usually. Periods indicate great importance. Commas indicate some importance. So I'm going to read it like you're actually supposed to read it, which is not pausing at the end of each line. I'm sorry to ruin that for you, but that's how you're supposed to read poetry. Unless you're reading a nursery rhyme, and then you can pause at the end of each line. But this is not a nursery rhyme, or hopefully it's not, because then the world's in a dark place. In his dark room he is finally alone, with spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. The only light is red and softly glows, as though this were a church, and he a priest preparing to intone a mass. Belfast, Beirut, Phnom Penh, all flesh is grass. He has a job to do. Solutions slop in trays beneath his hands, which do not tremble then, though seem to now. Rural England, home again to ordinary plain, which simple weather can dispel, to fields which don't explode beneath the feet of running children in a nightmare heat. You see how much more natural and just overall better that was? That's how you're supposed to read poetry. So now you know. And this is it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and tune in for our next lesson.